How many of you here today are sports fans? Football, either kind, basketball, baseball, volleyball, tennis, Formula One, any sport. And just to clarify, I don't mean your casual, oh yeah, I could turn on the TV and watch that sport because I have nothing better to do kind of fan. I mean, you actually have a team or player that you specifically support. So now, raise your hand if that's you. Well, congratulations. Statistically speaking, you are nearly 50% more likely to be happier throughout the course of your life than the people who didn't raise their hands, the non-fans. Sorry, non-fans, but statistically speaking, you're just never going to be as happy as the passionate sports fans you know, and the communities they form. Now, when someone says passionate sports fan, many of you might imagine something along the lines of this. For this past year, every time I walked into school on a Monday morning, I had a routine that I'm pretty sure drove most of my friends completely insane. I would walk into the hallway outside homeroom just before class and start rambling on and on about my favorite football club, AC Milan, my favorite American football team, the Chicago Bears, and the American Fantasy Football League I'm in. Some mornings, if American football games were still going on, I'd walk in yelling at my phone, shouting abuse at players who were 15,000 kilometers away and naturally couldn't hear me. And that's after I've spent the night yelling similar levels of insanity at my TV, when I probably should have been sleeping, or, given I'm a grade 11 student, studying. I can even admit, with some pain, that I've cried over some games. So now, I know what you must be wondering. Now that I've painted this picture of these crazy fools who go insane at every other moment, who could cry over a simple game where their team is performing badly, how could I possibly try to convince you that they are happier than non-fans? Well, the fact of the matter is, it's not about winning or losing, or even staying calm. It's about the community. Even on the worst days, even when you lose to your biggest rivals and you completely crash out, and your phone just happens to jump out of your hands. You didn't throw it, it just jumped out of your hands, all by itself. Even then, it's an experience that you will never forget, because it's an experience that you share with other fans, your community of like-minded people. Don't think I'm the only one who's thrown their phone, had their phone jump out of their hands while crashing out over a crazy game. I'm not the only one who's traveled halfway across the globe to see their team live. I'm not the only one who stayed up all night the day before an exam just to watch their team play. Because in the end, no matter the reason why you fall in love with a sport, the reason you stay in love with that sport is because of the community with which you share every moment of passion. The simple act of putting on your team's jersey and going to watch a game, win or lose, releases a dopamine hit in your brain. In fact, a 2022 study in the UK showed that sports fans have lower rates of depression and loneliness than non-fans. Honestly, if you want to go really broad here, it's not even about being on the same team. The entirety of fans of any given sport can form a community. My closest friend, the foundations of our early relationship were, naturally, football, even though we didn't support the same team. Even now when we talk, it's still roughly 50% football and 50% everything else going on in our lives, the world, and anything else that you could think of that we should possibly talk about. Of course, I'd like to think we'd still be friends, even if it wasn't for the football. But because of its regularly scheduled events, studies show that sports act as a constant facilitator of connection. You always have a goal to text someone about, transfer news to share, a loss to mock your friends about. That's extremely important because that means that you are always being enabled to make a social connection with someone over something going on in any given sport. Still, some of you must surely be wondering, what about the negative effects of sports that studies certainly have also explored? What about those times when someone's team isn't doing so well? Naturally, any fan can tell you, after a tough loss or at the end of a horrible season, especially if it was particularly bad or unexpected, you feel absolutely gutted. That feeling, commonly referred to by psychologists as sports fan depression, is actually similar to experiencing grief, with studies showing that sports fans may experience trouble sleeping, irritability, or even a low persistent mood in the days following a bad loss or at the end of a terrible season. Even then, however, sports act as a constant beacon of hope. And it all comes down to one of the most repeated phrases in sports. There's always the next one. Whether it's the next game or the next derby or the next season, studies have shown that sports fans are often more resilient than non-fans because they are used to being knocked down after those losses. But they always get back up for that next game or that next season. Sports brings people together. Yes, I know, it's corny, incredibly corny, and probably very overused. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, and it could be interpreted in many different ways. Of course, playing on the same team as someone would bring you closer together to that person. Well, most of the time anyways, but supporting the same team as someone, or even watching the same sport as someone, can bring you closer together to that person too. Because you see, sports isn't just about the professional players. It's about us, the majority, the people supporting them and each other, the fan base, which is part of a community across the world. So let's go back to that image of the stereotypical sports fan and take a look at the other half of their time. Not the times when they're yelling abuse at the TV, or their phone is jumping out of their hands, or they're just rambling on about how some players really shouldn't be players. Instead, imagine this. A group of friends watching a game together, chatting about other things in the quiet moments, holding hands in anticipation during the close calls, spending the next week talking about that game regardless of how it ended. Telling the story of that night years later, it won't be about the game itself, but about the friendship and the moments shared in watching sports together. For me, that's the stereotypical sports fan. A fan who is a part of a community, a fan who is understood by their community, and a fan who will always be part of that community. Phil Jackson, the former coach of the 6-time championship-winning Chicago Bulls, once said, "The strength of each team is each player, and the strength of each player is its team." So now I say to you, the happiness of each sports fan is in the community they belong to, and the happiness of each sports community is in the passion of its fans. And so I challenge all of you to break down the stereotype of the passionate sports fan and join their community. Thank you.